Hi there, I'm Lucas, and today I'm pretty excited about this new review about this nifty little monitor here. This is the Fotga A50-TLS. I'm so excited because this monitor has a lot to offer. First thing to point out is there are 4 versions of this monitor. You can see it already indicated here on the packaging. The first is the A50, then we have the A50T, then the A50TL, and then the last one, the biggest one, which is this one, the A50-TLS. So the difference is not only the letters, because the letters mean something. Basically, there are up to 3 different additional features that the basic version has not. However, everything else that I show here in this review is also available in the normal A50 version. So we have 3 letters, TLS. The T is for touchscreen, so we actually have a touchscreen console in this little monitor. The L is for LUT, because this monitor actually features integrated 3D LUT support. You can load your own LUTs into this little monitor to use for preview. I will show you in a minute why this is interesting, even though your camera may have integrated LUT support already. And last but not least, the S is for SDI, because the biggest version actually has SDI inputs and outputs. This monitor is 5-inch, which is my preferred screen size for an on-camera monitor. So one of the first things you may notice is that it's relatively wide, so the bezel goes much further than you would usually expect it to next to the screen. The reason for this is because it is that feature packed. As you can already see here, we have the 2 SDI ports, one for in, one for out. We have a battery out to power our camera. We have a headphone out for monitoring. We have a DC in. We have not 1, but 2 NPF battery holders, so we can use 2 batteries at the same time or hot swap them. I will show you in a minute. And then we also have a USB extension port, which is interesting for loading firmware updates as well as the LUTs that I talked about earlier. We have an HDMI in. We have an JTZ Connect port that we will also talk about a bit later, as well as an HDMI out underneath the screens, because there was literally no space anymore on the back. Let me screw this thing off here. One thing that you may have already seen is we have the usual connection points on the left, on the right, and also underneath the monitor. What we have here, which is a bit special in my opinion, is we have a rosette mount around each of these threads, which is pretty neat. For example, the included hot shoe adapter also has this little rosette mount. So basically it's very easy to mount your camera to existing rosette mounts that you may have on your rig already, because with a rosette it cannot twist anymore. You may have already seen that there are 2 1/4-inch threads on each side of this monitor. Inside the rosette mount though is a 3/8-inch thread, and these are actually already one of the little tiny beautiful details with this monitor, because in the packaging we get in total 4 little screw adapters that you can see here. One is already mounted inside my monitor here. 2 of them are the classic 1/4-inch threads. So basically you have a 1/3 1/4-inch thread on your side. The other 2, however, are M6 adapters. You may not know this, but in the classic and original ARRI rosette mount, there is no 1/4-inch thread here. There is an M6 thread underneath. Of course, M6 and 1/4-inch do not fit into each other, but the size is rather similar. Later then, other companies like Sony also adapted the rosette mount that ARRI uses, but not the M6 mount, but rather a 1/4-inch thread. Basically, you can use whatever thread you need for your system, and this is quite a beauty and something that I think many manufacturers don't think about. And while we are talking about these little inserts, I think it's worth mentioning that there are a lot of other accessories shipping with this monitor. So unpacking this monitor is quite an experience, so I filmed it for you. So just have a look what's in the box. Getting the slipcase off is a bit harder than I want to admit. Opening the box, we are greeted with some info on the sun hood as well as the sun hood directly underneath. On the next layer we can find the monitor securely in place. Aside of the prints on the packaging, we also have a little manual. On the second half of the box we finally find all the accessories. A little cold shoe with a 1/4-inch screw to attach anywhere, the little cold shoe rosette mount that you already saw, Then a great, thin yet well-adjustable SDI cable, that's seldom. A common DC cable, a full-size HDMI cable, the little insert threads we already talked about, an Allen key, some microfiber cloth with a printed logo, and last but not least a funny, tiny flathead screwdriver for the thread inserts. Something that is not inside the package that you can purchase separately is this little protection glass that I have here. So it's not scratched, there's still a layer of protection on here because I just wanted to show you how to install it. There are these little notches here on the side. We can just push it in. As always, it's much easier when you don't do it in front of a camera while filming yourself. Wait a second, so now we have it in here. And we can also, of course, pop on the cool sun hood that we have, which I actually also like quite a lot. I just removed it for this video because it's a bit easier to see when it's not attached. So now we have a very protected, great monitor. The only downside with this protection glass is that you cannot use the touchscreen anymore. I'm usually not the biggest fan of touchscreens and monitors because you just leave like little smudges on the screen. This is something you have to keep in mind when you want the protection glass. I value protection way more than the touchscreen. With this wheel we can enter the menu and also of course navigate inside the menu. We saw this before on monitors. So the first 4 buttons and the last one here can be set to our liking. We can set any function to these. With the plus and minus buttons F5 and F6 we can adjust things that have to get up or down. For example, the volume on the headphone out, the brightness of the monitor or the zoom level. With a quick push on the on-off button we can enable or disable the touchscreen. And while we're talking about the buttons, I think it's worth to talk about this little connector here, the JTZ 6 connector that I talked about earlier. What we can do with this is hook up any LAN cable that we have and hook it up to a remote from our JTZ system. For example, the top handle or also the follow folk. We can control these buttons 1 to 4 with the remote from our JTZ remote control. For example, we could quickly enable and disable the false color function or the zoom level to quickly pull a bit better focus. So this is a very handy tool that I found really cool and very thought through. So if you are a JTZ user like I am, I think it's a cool way to extend the functionality of the system you're using. Another thing we have to talk about is the battery out port here. I tried this and there was something interesting that I noticed. Because when I had hooked up one battery to this monitor, I wasn't able to power the camera properly. But as soon as I connect a second battery, I can power my monitor with no problem. So this is something you have to keep in mind if you want to run the camera from your little monitor. I think now is a good time to simply switch on this monitor and have a look at the display. So when we started, we have this nice little loading screen. Just wait a few seconds and then you can see the camera image. So the camera is right behind me. I just got the little cable here. So because we talked about the batteries, there's one of my favorite features I want to show you. So I only have one battery in here right now. So now imagine it's running low and I have a second battery here in my hand and I just pop in the second battery while it's running and get out the first battery while it's running and it's still running. And this is cool because you have continuous power. You can just switch battery on the run. And of course you can hook up both, so you have extended battery life, like running it forever. Speaking about battery life, I did my usual testing thing, running this monitor through each battery 3 times and getting an average. And with the smaller battery, the NPF 550 battery, I was getting around 1 hour and 40 minutes, so 1.5 hours is something you can expect from this 90 minutes, which is quite fair. And with the larger battery, this is an the type of NPF 750 battery type. It's not an original battery, of course. I get around 3 hours of continuous power for this monitor. I was not at the fullest brightness because I usually don't use the full brightness when I don't need it. So the battery life is very fair and the ability to combine them to even get much more battery life is something that I really like about it. So the whole time this monitor is on, you saw one of the first functions, which is the LUT function that I have set to the button 3 here. When I disable this, you can see the original V-log signal that my camera puts through. Let's have a look at the LUTs in general. I will go into the menu and I will just quickly use the touchscreen here Then I navigate, I push the button once, the wheel, then I get into the menu. And one thing that is funny, I think, to notice is that this LUT is also affecting the menu, because when I set this off, you can see it's much lighter. When we receive the monitor, there are 4 LUTs pre-installed that we cannot delete or adjust anyhow. I have actually installed some LUTs myself. For example, right now I've enabled the V-Log Leeming LUT 1 here. Then I have, for example, the Cine D LUT from Noam Kroll, and then we have the integrated LUTs. There is a V-Log LUT already integrated into this monitor. Then we have Log C, which is the LUT that you would use on an Arri camera, on an Arri Alexa. And then we have S-Log 3 as well as S-Log 2 for your Sony camera. And of course, if you don't have any LUT support inside your camera, or you switch cameras quite often, it's pretty cool to have this functionality integrated and be done with it and not think about it anymore. So yeah, I think let's hop into the menu here and look at the functions from this monitor. So when we get inside the menu, first thing we can see in the upper left is the battery life as well as information about our signal. I have a 4K signal here. And in the lower left, we can see our firmware version. So we can navigate with this little wheel here, press it again, and we get into our submenu. Let's get into the first submenu, the display. We have safety markers. This is basically just a framing help, a center marker when you need it. The marker mat is also a framing help, but it renders borders into your image. For example, I put it to 2.35 by 1 here, which is not really center, but anyway, usually we can hit this button here, the little eye in the corner, and when I hit it, I have a preview of my settings. Now you can see I have the black borders here, which I can't see right here in this things. You can set a different marker color, as you can see here with the center marker. For the markers, we can set a different thickness, underscan, video aspect ratio. It's the normal stuff that you already know about. We will talk in a second about the anamorphic mode in a bit more detail. I really dig it, can spoil you so far. Then we have a zoom function, which we can set on and off, and as soon as we have it on, we can also change the zoom factor. I think it's a bit weird because at 100% it's like not what we would expect from 100%. However, usually when I put on the zoom, I don't want a 100% preview, so this is quite handy. I have it actually set to a function button. Freeze frame, always handy for setup. Rotate, interesting if you are on a Steadicam. And dot to dot could also be called 1 by 1 because it basically shows you a 1 by 1 image preview from the signal that you're offering, like a lossless zoom, which is pretty neat. In the function menu, we can see more of the interesting features of this monitor, like a monochrome preview of different channels, as well as a normal black and white preview, the false color. We have peaking, we can set to different levels. We can set the peaking color, of course. We can enable the zebra as soon as we do. We can, of course, set the zebra value. A histogram can be enabled in the monitor. Unfortunately, no waveforms. Audio bars can be enabled for bottom or the top, which look like this. I think it's quite funny. Don't use them very often. The color bars won't work when you just like hit the quick preview quickly. You have to get out of the menu to really see the color bars, which is good for calibration. Interesting again, the LUTs will also work on the color bars. In the function menu, we can also set the function buttons. So for example, I have the anamorphic mode on F1, the user group 2, like my quick save preset on the 2, the LUT switch on the 3, and the zoom on the 4. For example, we can just quickly go on here. We can set the freeze, rotation, dot to dot. We can set nearly everything inside the monitor to one of the function buttons, which is quite cool in my opinion. For the F5 and F6, as I already said, we can set different things, like we can adjust the backlight, the zoom times, the zebra value, the volume. Then again, for the F7 button, we can set a function how we like it, and that's this menu. We talked about the LUTs before, and then we have the basic setup where you can set, for example, the backlight of your monitor and all the color things that you might want to. As soon as I hit the user button, I can set it any way I like. It's brightness, contrast, saturation, sharpness, hue, and so on and so forth. In the system tab, I can set the language. I like it English, but You can set, of course, also many other languages like my native one here too. UI transparency of the menu. The touch can be enabled and disabled in this menu too. As I mentioned before, when we hit the on-off switch quickly, we can enable and disable the touch function also right away. This cannot be set any differently. Then there's a fan inside this monitor. So you can set this to manual or auto. If you like noise, it's not very loud, but you can enable it and leave it like that. I usually have it at off, but I put it to auto before, and I never had the occasion that this monitor would run on the fan control when I used it. So of course right now it's running because I had it on manual before, but yeah, maybe it's clever to put it on auto. But there's a fan in this monitor, something to consider. You can set it on mute, which I have on because I usually don't use audio from these monitors. We can factory reset the monitor and upgrade the firmware. For this, you just put a flash drive with the new firmware inside the monitor, hit this button, and it will update automatically. Make sure that your batteries are charged quite a bit. And last but not least, we can set the input from HDMI to SDI. There are a few functions that I want to talk about in a bit more detail. For example, the false color that I have set to my F7 button here. As soon as I enable it, I get this little value range on the right side of this monitor here. Of course, many monitors have this kind of range, but what I like is that it does not get cropped. So this image gets a bit smaller, but we have the full image still. Another cool thing is that the false colors work on top of your LUT. So when you have a LUT preview enabled, which makes sense for a log image that you might film, and I disable or enable the LUT, I get a different preview, which is good because this range is usually not made for log imagery. Now, another really cool thing about this monitor is the ability to save something like scene files. So let me show you what I mean. I have this pure image. I will enable the LUT. I will also enable the anamorphic mode that I have on my first button here for like maybe 1.33 time. And what I also want to enable is a center marker, like here. So this is my setup. It makes no sense in this case, but you get the idea. And now what I do now is I press and hold the 2 button on my monitor. And now you can see this little image here, user group 2. So basically I will now disable the anamorphic preview, and then I will disable the LUT, maybe enable the false colors. And when I now hit the 2 button, you can see how this whole setup comes up. So my LUT is there, my center marker is there, as well as the anamorphic preview. So you can set your typical working environment to 1 button, so you press it and you're there. Even though somebody else comes up and changes everything, you can just like get back with a push of a button, which is quite a cool feature. Again, very well thought through. Even though I may not be a friend of a touch screen, I think it's worth pointing out the big advantages we have with it. Like the most basic feature, double tap the screen, get into the menus. Now we can switch everything as we like, preview it, and get out of it by tapping the screen. Just like on an Android phone, we can access some sort of quick menu when we pull down the screen from the top. Here we can quickly switch the different function buttons to our liking, or also adjust the brightness of the screen. A tap again and we're out. Note that it won't work on the middle on the screen. You have to drag it down from the top. And now something every smartphone user will already know, we can use 2 fingers to just zoom in, and we can zoom in quite far. Of course, we are degrading the image quality to an extent because we are only zooming into our 4K image. Still, we get a much larger preview. With 1 finger then, we can just swipe around to look at different parts of the image. We can zoom out again with both fingers, drag around, zoom out, or we can just press and hold with 1 finger and we are back at the full preview. Note that this works on top of any mode. Even when I get into the 2x mag mode for anamorphic recording, for example, I can still zoom into my image. Also in false color and probably any other mode, I can zoom and pan around just as I like it. Now we have to talk about one of my really favorite things about this monitor. I'm really excited about this, and this is what I already showed you here, the anamorphic preview. So by now we have a few anamorphic settings inside this monitor. A 1.25 factor anamorphic, which I think is not that common, not that used that much. Then we have the very common 1.33 anamorphic aspect ratio, which is, for example, interesting for many of the SLR Magic anamorphics, or for example, if you use something like the Century optics adapter. Then we have 1.5, which is something that I think many people will love about this monitor, to have 1.5 anamorphic D-squeeze, which is very interesting for many cool lenses. I think many of the Scorama lenses, as well as the Bolex Möller lenses, really cool. But now I have here this very sweet Kova for Bell & Howell, or Kova B&H 2-time anamorphic adapter. And I think actually the mode for this anamorphic D-squeeze is where this monitor shines the most, but let's have a look in more detail. The Panasonic GH5S offers in-camera D-squeeze for the preview, but I cannot output this over the HDMI, so it's always handy to have an anamorphic D-squeeze inside your monitor. I have my D-squeeze set here to the option button 1. When I press it once, I get to the 1.25 mode. When I press it twice, I get to the 1.33 mode. So this is exactly the right aspect ratio for my Century anamorphic adapter. Now it's de-squeezed properly and looks quite nice. Of course, the Century anamorphic adapter has a few limits here and there, but now at least we have it perfectly de-squeezed in the preview for our monitor. When I press it again, I get to the 1.5. Again, I get to 2 times, and then again I get to 2 times MAC. But I'm getting here a bit soon, so let's put on the 2-time anamorphic lens. The first thing we can notice is how much wider the image got because of the 2 times anamorphic, which makes sense, of course. However, I also had to move the camera a bit because the Kova B&H cannot close focus this much. And what you can also see right away is that I now have a 4:3 image frame here. The GH5S as well as the GH5 offer a native 4:3 recording mode for anamorphic recording, which is quite good because this is what we want. The problem with this is, as soon as we activate this, we have the 4:3 image inside a 16:9 container over the HDMI. So we get black borders on the right and on the left of our screen. This is quite a normal problem. However, for many monitors this is very problematic because you have to hack your zoom modes into something. Well, I will show you what the issue is. So I will push here once for the 1.25, 1.33, 1.5, and again for the 2 times. Now you can see I have a tiny preview, because in the left and in the right of the image I actually have these black borders, and this is an issue. Of course, now usually you would go into your display settings or wherever this is, there's the zoom, we'll hit the zoom, then we set it on, then I have to find the right value to this, but not with this monitor. I don't want to tease you too much and bother you this much with this crap information. What I want to do now is press it one more time and enter the 2 times MAC mode. What you can already notice is that the image is zoomed in now. We don't have the black borders anymore, and we have a perfectly fine anamorphic preview. One thing that you might not notice though the first time you see this is when you look closer on this box here on the right, you can see not the complete text, but you can read up to Vente. So when I hit it again, you can see that I can only read the V now. So basically I cropped in a bit more than the black borders. And this makes actually perfect sense, because when we did stretch 4:3 to 2 times, we receive an 8:3 image, which is quite logical. And an 8:3 image translates to 2.66:1. And this is not the usual aspect ratio we work in. Usually we want to get the right CinemaScope aspect ratio, which is also a standard from the DCI, which is 2.39:1. So the 2 times MAC mode is actually not getting rid of the black. It also crops our image directly into the perfect 2.39:1 aspect ratio. So it shows us directly what will land in our film later on. And this is truly one of the little many little features that I truly love. As always in life, not everything is perfect with this monitor. Because one thing that I think it will get the most shit for is that it's not very bright. So this monitor has no ultra bright display that many people claim to need these days. One thing to keep in mind is that ultra bright displays eat through your batteries really fucking fast. And oftentimes they have very limited battery support, for example, only one little battery, and or they're only touchscreen, so you don't have any buttons on the side anymore. And I really dig to use buttons with a monitor. I don't want to touch my screen the whole time. I mean, I do this with my smartphone, and of course I got used to it, but on my preview monitor I actually don't want my fingerprints on. So far in my life I was pretty happy with the common brightness of these kind of monitors. Of course, when you're shooting your documentary on the sun or only in the desert, it is quite handy to have an ultra bright display. And of course I'm a bit sarcastic here, and I think there are many reasonable explanations why you would want an ultra bright display. But with the use, for example, with the sun hood, and in the most common shooting conditions, which is not in the sun and not in the desert, I find that the normal display brightness is really all I need. Right now I don't even have it at full brightness. I usually don't use it at full brightness. And I value the inputs, outputs, as well as the feature set much more than the ability to burn my iris with my little on-camera monitor. Here we are at the end of the video. If you didn't already notice, I would recommend this monitor. I really like it quite a lot. I think it has a great feature set. It offers me everything I need. It has great anamorphic support, it has great LUT support and everything. It does everything that I need in 4K, and many monitors don't do this. It just takes a headache from me. You know, there was always something with these monitors, these little on-camera monitors, that I disliked, especially with this size of 5-inch. Really the only thing lacking here is the display brightness if you are in need for an ultra bright display. However, aside of that, it's really more or less my dream monitor, and I say this with all honesty. I really dig this monitor and would totally recommend it to you. Now, thank you very much for watching my little video here. I have a few things coming up. I thought about maybe talking a bit about these nice little anamorphic lenses here a bit more. Don't know if this kind of stuff is interesting for you. I can't stress enough how grateful I am that you guys watched these videos till this point in time. I'm really happy to have this kind of viewership, which enables me to make these videos actually. And yeah, thank you very much again for your views. I don't want to ask you to subscribe or hit the like button or hit the bell, how people always say this. I enjoy when you just watch them and enjoy yourself. So have a nice time, have a nice day, and see you next time. Bye.